Hello guys. Welcome to the story world. We are to serve you best stories, but we need your help to complete our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So find the subscribe button and please click on it. Let's jumping into story. The autumn wind off the Pacific carried a damp chill through the playground of Westbrook Secondary, rattling the chain-link fences and scattering crisp yellow leaves across the asphalt. Kids in hoodies and backpacks clustered in noisy groups, trading TikToks, shoving each other, laughing too loud. John Mercer sat alone on a wooden bench near the far end of the schoolyard, half hidden behind a tree. His lunch, a peanut butter sandwich and an apple, was balanced carefully on his lap. He kept his head down as he ate, eyes flicking up every so often to scan the crowd. He wasn't looking for friends. He was watching for trouble. John had learned early that eye contact was an invitation, an unspoken challenge to the boys who saw him as easy prey. His quietness wasn't shyness anymore. It was survival. A group of 3 seniors, varsity jackets, sneakers still muddy from morning football practice, wandered toward him. He recognized them instantly. Tyler Ricks, captain of the football team, Eli Harris, his right-hand goon, and Ben Torres, the one who always laughed too loud. They stopped a few feet from his bench. "Yo, Johnny boy," Tyler said, dragging out the name like it tasted bad. "You hiding out again?" John said nothing. Tyler's smirk widened. "What's for lunch? Oh, wait." In one quick movement, he snatched the sandwich from John's hands and tossed it toward Eli. The apple rolled to the ground, bumping against John's worn sneakers. Eli pretended to sniff the sandwich. Gourmet. Then, without warning, he threw it into a nearby puddle. Ben laughed. "Oops, guess it's soup now." John kept his face blank. He didn't lunge for the sandwich, didn't shout, didn't even flinch. Inside, however, something shifted, like a tiny crack appearing in a frozen lake. He imagined Tyler's smirk breaking apart under a blow. He pictured Eli's laughter cut short, his eyes wide with panic. He didn't act on it. Not yet. John lived with his mother in a small one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on East Hastings. His father had left when John was 6, disappearing to Alberta with a new girlfriend and never looking back. His mother, Claire, worked double shifts as a nurse. When she was home, she was too tired to notice much about him beyond the basics. "Homework done?" "Yes." "Okay. Don't stay up late." The apartment smelled faintly of detergent from downstairs. His room was small, just a bed, a desk, and a single bookshelf where dusty library books leaned against each other like tired soldiers. John liked the quiet. At school, noise meant attention, and attention meant trouble. Here, silence was control, but silence also left space for thoughts. That night, as rain pattered against the window, he replayed the lunch scene in his mind. He imagined walking up to Tyler after practice, holding something heavy in his hand. The thought didn't scare him. It soothed him. He opened his sketchbook, something no one at school knew he had, and began drawing Tyler's face. Not smiling, not smirking, just still. Eyes closed. A week later, on his walk to school, John saw something unusual. A crow lying on the sidewalk, wings bent at odd angles. It was still warm. He knelt beside it, studying the way its feathers caught the morning light, the way its eye, black and glossy, stared without seeing. He touched it with one finger, tracing the edge of a wing. For a moment, he thought about moving it to the grass. But then he left it there, curious to see how many kids would notice, how they would react. At lunch, he heard 2 girls whisper about the dead bird on Hastings. One said it was gross, the other said it was sad. John felt pleased. Mr. Langford, John's English teacher, was one of the few adults who occasionally noticed him. One rainy Tuesday, after class, Langford stopped him at the door. "John," he said, "you're quiet in class, but your essays, they're interesting. Dark, but interesting." John wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a warning. Langford continued, "You ever think about writing for the school paper?" John shook his head. The idea of putting his thoughts out for everyone to read, letting them see inside, made his stomach tighten. "Well," Langford said, "if you change your mind, you might find it's a good way to be heard without, shouting." He meant well, but John didn't want to be heard. He wanted to be felt. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Tyler and his friends cornered him in the locker room after gym class. The air was thick with sweat and cheap deodorant. John had just finished changing into his jeans when Tyler shoved him hard against the lockers. "Still ignoring us?" Tyler asked. John's bag fell to the floor, spilling books and a cracked phone. Eli picked up one of the books, a battered copy of Mice and Men, and tossed it into the shower stall. Ben leaned close to John's ear. "You know what your problem is? You think you're better than us. But you're nothing. A loser." They left laughing, the door banging shut behind them. John stood there, staring at the floor. His hands were shaking, not with fear, but with something hotter, something heavier. By the time he walked home, the shaking had stopped. Inside, he felt strangely calm, like the surface of a lake right before a storm. That night, he didn't just draw Tyler's face, he drew the entire locker room in precise, chilling detail. Only this time, Tyler, Eli, and Ben weren't standing. They were lying on the floor, and they weren't breathing. Friday morning, as John walked into school, he saw police cars parked out front, students clustered in groups, murmuring. Someone had smashed the trophy case in the main hallway. The glass glittered across the floor like ice. Tyler Ricks stood nearby, arguing with a teacher. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. John slowed his pace. He didn't smile, but inside something unfurled. A small, secret satisfaction. For the first time, he wondered what it would feel like if the blood was there for a different reason. A reason he controlled. The smashed trophy case was never officially connected to John. The principal made a morning announcement blaming vandalism on an unknown individual, promising security cameras would soon be installed. Tyler Ricks was furious, insisting that some loser had done it to mess with him. John listened quietly from his desk. When Tyler glanced at him during math, John didn't look away. That tiny moment, the way Tyler's eyes flickered with something like uncertainty, stayed with him the rest of the day. That night, lying in bed, John realized something. The cut on Tyler's forehead from the broken glass had done more for him than weeks of drawing or imagining, because for the first time, Tyler looked human, not invincible, and that was intoxicating. 2 weeks later, an ice storm hit Vancouver. The sidewalks glittered dangerously. John's walk to school took him past a narrow alley between two apartment buildings. That morning, he saw Mr. Chu, a frail, elderly man who ran the corner convenience store, shuffling carefully along with a cane. At first, John simply slowed to watch. Then an idea, quick and quiet, slid into his mind. He stepped forward just enough to make Mr. Chow startle, his cane slipping on the ice. The old man went down hard, the cane clattering away. John crouched instantly, face full of concern. "Oh no, Mr. Chow, are you okay?" Mr. Chow groaned in pain, holding his hip. John retrieved the cane, helped him up, walked him back toward his store, and all the while, inside, he felt it again. That same warm, buzzing sensation. By the time he reached school, he had already replayed the scene in his head a dozen times, not because he felt guilty, but because it made him feel alive. Winter stretched on. John began experimenting. Small acts that nudged people toward harm without pointing back to him. A girl named Lena was carrying a stack of heavy textbooks in the hallway. John accidentally bumped her elbow, sending them tumbling down the stairs. She sprained her wrist. During chemistry, he quietly loosened the cap on a bottle of vinegar in the supply cabinet. Later, another student knocked it over, the sharp smell filling the lab as everyone coughed. He was careful. Always careful. No one suspected him. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Langford asked him to stay after class again. "I've been reading your latest essay," Langford said. "It's unsettling. You wrote about a man who enjoys watching people suffer. Where does that come from?" John shrugged. "Just ideas." Langford studied him. Writers often reveal parts of themselves in their work, even when they don't mean to. John looked him straight in the eye. What if some parts aren't meant to be revealed? Langford hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Then you'd better be careful what you write." John walked out into the rain, the conversation looping in his mind. It hadn't been a confession, but a part of him wished it had been. March brought a freak warm spell, melting the ice and filling the streets with cold puddles. John was walking home late one evening when he saw it. A stray cat darting across the road as a car approached. The driver honked, swerving, but not enough. The thud was soft but final. John approached slowly. The cat lay on its side, breathing shallowly, eyes glazed. Something in him leaned forward. He crouched, touching its matted fur. It was suffering, and he realized he could end that suffering right now. All it would take was a rock from the roadside. He picked one up, felt the weight of it in his palm. When he was done, the cat was still. For the rest of the night, he felt light, almost euphoric. Not because he had killed, but because, in that moment, he had decided whether something lived or died. John's mother noticed nothing. She was working extra shifts again, saving for a possible move to a quieter neighborhood. At school, Tyler and his crew still tried to provoke him. But he had stopped reacting entirely. That unsettled them more than anger ever had. Lena avoided him after the textbook incident, though she didn't know why. Mr. Cho still smiled when John came into the store. The mask was working. In April, the school hosted a spring carnival in the gym. Games, food stalls, music echoing off the high ceiling. John volunteered for the haunted maze set up in one corner. Dressed in a cheap skeleton mask, he hid behind a partition, waiting for groups to wander through. When a younger student, maybe 12, came alone, John stepped out silently, blocking the path. The kid froze, eyes wide. John didn't move. He just stood there, breathing slowly through the mask, until the boy whimpered and backed away. No one else saw, but the memory of that look, the frozen terror, replayed in John's head for days. By late spring, John had stopped waiting for opportunities to fall into his lap. He began creating them. One evening, he followed a classmate named Aaron partway home, staying far enough back to avoid being noticed. At a dark stretch near the park, he picked up a rock and threw it hard into the bushes. Aaron jumped, spinning around. "Who's there?" John stayed in the shadows, silent, watching Aaron's breathing quicken before he finally ran the rest of the way home. The next day at school, Aaron told friends he thought someone had been following him. John listened from a nearby table, fighting the urge to smile. June arrived. John turned 17. One night, walking back from the store, he saw a man passed out drunk near the curb. The man's wallet was halfway out of his pocket. John knelt, took the wallet, and placed it on the sidewalk, just out of reach. Then he sat on a nearby bench, waiting. Minutes later, a second man appeared, spotted the wallet, and snatched it. The drunk man woke, confused and shouting. John stood and walked away. The scene burned into his mind. He hadn't taken anything, but he had caused something. A tiny storm in two strangers' lives. On the last day of school, Tyler shoved past John in the hallway one last time. "See you never, loser," he said, heading for the exit. John watched him go. Something told him that wasn't true. That summer, John left Vancouver for Seattle, claiming he was moving in with an uncle to work and start fresh. In truth, he wanted distance, anonymity, a new city where no one knew his history. Seattle's rain-washed streets welcomed him with neon reflections and dark alleys. On his third night there, walking home from a late shift at a cafe, he passed an alley where a man was being mugged. The attacker glanced at John and ran. The victim staggered forward, clutching his side. John stepped closer, seeing the man's pain, his fear. And for a split second, he considered not calling for help. Because that moment, that exact second where someone's life balanced between survival and collapse, was more intoxicating than anything else he had ever felt. Seattle was perfect. The streets were wide, the nights were long, and no one cared enough to notice a quiet young renting a basement apartment in Rainier Valley. John told neighbors he was working at a late-night cafe downtown. That was true. For now. But what mattered more was what the city gave him: anonymity. Here, there were no Tyler Ricks, no teachers with probing questions, no mother watching from the kitchen doorway. The rain made everything cleaner, quieter, easier to hide. It happened one Thursday night in August. John was walking home at 1:30 a.m., the streets slick with fresh rain, when he spotted a man in a dark hoodie stumbling ahead. His movements were jerky, unsteady, drunk, maybe. They were alone. No traffic. A thought settled in John's mind as calmly as if it had been waiting there for years. No one will see. He quickened his pace. The man turned into an alley. John followed. "Hey," he said. The man turned, startled. "What?" John stepped forward and without hesitation slammed the man into the brick wall. The impact knocked the breath out of him. John's hand found the knife in his jacket pocket, one he'd bought for safety months ago. The blade slid easily across the man's throat. The sound, a wet, choking gasp, was quieter than John expected. When it was over, John stepped back, breathing steadily. He wiped the blade on the man's hoodie, then walked away without looking back. No one stopped him. No one even knew. The news barely covered it. Late night robbery gone wrong, the anchor said. No suspects. John watched the segment while eating breakfast, the hum of the fridge filling the silence. He felt no guilt, only a faint disappointment that the coverage hadn't shown the victim's face in fear. That was what he remembered most vividly, and it had been beautiful. John didn't rush to kill again. He waited, watched, chose carefully. September brought a storm that knocked out power in several neighborhoods. That night, John picked a target, a man smoking outside a bar in Belltown. The second kill was smoother, cleaner. John approached from behind, arm across the man's throat, pulling him into a side alley. This time, he didn't rush the knife. He let the panic build in his victim's breathing before finishing it. The body wasn't found until the next morning. John clipped the newspaper article and tucked it into a shoebox under his bed. By the third killing, the city noticed. Seattle authorities are investigating what may be a pattern in 3 recent homicides, the news anchor said. Each victim was male, each killed late at night in isolated areas. An online forum dubbed the killer the rain shadow, after the dark, hidden areas left dry behind mountains during storms, places you wouldn't think to look until it was too late. John liked the name. Killing wasn't enough anymore. John wanted fear before the end. He started following potential victims for days, learning their routines. He'd bump into them by accident at a store, nod at them in passing, sometimes even hold the door for them. Then, a week later, they'd disappear. For John, it was like writing a story, one only he knew the ending to. In November, John followed a man named Carter. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a habit of walking home alone from a gym. One night, John made his move, stepping from the shadows with the knife. But Carter wasn't like the others. He spun, grabbing John's wrist, shoving him against the wall. For a moment, John felt the cold edge of his own blade pressing into his skin. Then instinct took over. He kneed Carter in the stomach, twisting free, and slashed across his attacker's arm. The fight was messy, loud, but Carter's strength drained fast from blood loss. When it was over, John staggered home, adrenaline still surging. That night, lying in bed, he realized something. He'd enjoyed the fight, the risk. A week later, police released a blurry security photo, a tall man in a dark jacket, face shadowed, walking near one of the crime scenes. John studied it for a long time. It wasn't clear enough to identify him, but it was a reminder he wasn't untouchable. Instead of fear, he felt excitement. They were looking for him now. December brought freezing rain. John picked a target carefully, a businessman who stayed late in his downtown office. He entered the building through an unlocked service door, waited in the dark parking garage, and struck as the man reached his car. The kill was silent, quick and precise. No struggle, no witnesses. For the first time, John felt a sense of art in it. January. Snow fell on Seattle, muffling the city. John walked through Pioneer Square, scanning for a target. That's when he saw her, a woman struggling with a broken umbrella, hurrying down a side street. He followed. But as he closed the distance, a siren wailed behind him. Police cruisers turned into the street, lights flashing. 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn. John Mercer, hands where we can see them. The name, his name, froze him in place. Someone had connected the dots. They cuffed him in the snow, the flashing lights painting the street red and blue. Reporters gathered, shouting questions. John kept his head down, until one camera came close enough for him to look straight into the lens. And then he smiled. Not for the cameras, not for the police, but because somewhere out there, someone watching the news would feel a chill and know the rain shadow was real. Thanks for listening. Hit the like button if you really like this story, and don't forget to subscribe.